The first thing my sister did after her rebirth was steal my bedroom. I stood in the doorway, my duffel bag still slung over my shoulder from a weekend trip, and watched her direct our father as he angled my desk through her old doorway and into mine. My mother hovered nearby, beaming, a tumbler of iced tea sweating in her hand. "Isn't this wonderful, Ilara?" Mom chirped, not looking at me. "Clara has decided she needs the northern light for her art. It's so much better in your room. You understand, of course, for her career." Clara, my younger sister by 2 years, turned to face me. Her smile was a venomous, triumphant thing I knew all too well. It was the exact same smile she had worn in another life, on this exact day, the day the dominoes of my destruction began to fall. "Don't be so selfish, Ilara," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "It's just a room. Besides, the storage room at the end of the hall is almost the same size. A bit less light, but you're always just reading your boring books anyway. You don't need it." The words were a perfect echo, a ghostly recording played back just for me. Last time I had screamed. I had thrown a tantrum, crying, pleading with my father, who simply shrugged and said, "Happy wife, happy life." I had accused Clara of being a spoiled brat, and my mother had slapped me for it, telling me I needed to learn to support my gifted sister. That fight had been the start of my isolation, the first crack in a foundation that would eventually shatter completely, leading to my lonely death. This time, I didn't scream. I had woken up in this life 2 months ago with the phantom pain of a collapsing car roof and the bitter taste of betrayal on my tongue. I had spent 60 days reliving every slight, every act of sabotage, every casual cruelty, all leading to that final fatal moment. I had spent 60 days waiting for this one. So instead of screaming, I smiled. It was a small, calm, almost beatific smile. It felt alien on my face. It completely unnerved them. Clara's triumphant expression faltered, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. My mother's cheery facade tightened. My father actually stopped moving the desk for a second to stare at me. "You're right," I said, my voice even and clear. "For her career, of course. Anything for Clara's career." I walked past them into formerly my room. I didn't look at the space I had spent 18 years of my life in. I didn't look at the faint pencil marks on the wall where I had tracked my height, or the spot under the window where I had hidden my diaries. I went to my closet, pulled out 2 large suitcases, and laid them on the bed. Then I began to pack, not with the frantic, tearful rage of the last life, but with a methodical, serene precision that was far more terrifying. My mother recovered first. "What are you doing? You don't need to move your things right this second. We can help you with the storage room tomorrow." "That's all right," I said, not looking at her as I folded a stack of sweaters. "I don't want to be a bother." Clara watched me, her arms crossed, a suspicious scowl now replacing her smirk. She expected a fight. The fight was the point. My resistance was the fuel for her victimhood, the justification for her theft. My compliance was a wrench in her gears. She didn't know what to do with it. "Well, good," she finally huffed, trying to regain control. "Glad to see you're finally learning your place." I paused, a pair of jeans in my hands. I looked up and met her eyes. "Oh, I have, Clara," I said softly. "I finally truly have." I knew what she was really after. It wasn't the northern light. It was the large built-in shelving unit next to the desk. It was where, in my last life, I had hidden the portfolio. The one filled with my secret design work, the concepts I had poured my soul into for a scholarship application to the country's top design institute. The portfolio Clara would find, steal, and use to win that same scholarship, launching the career my mother was so proud of, while I was left with accusations of being a jealous, delusional liar. My compliance now wasn't surrender. It was the first move in a war she didn't even know we were fighting. And this time, I knew every single move she was going to make. My previous life had been a masterclass in gaslighting and neglect, a slow burn tragedy orchestrated by my own family. Clara was born with a paintbrush in her hand and a spotlight following her every move. She was the artist, the prodigy, the golden child. I was the afterthought, the quiet, bookish girl whose accomplishments were footnotes in the grand saga of Clara's burgeoning genius. When I was 10, I won the regional spelling bee. I came home clutching a small, gaudy trophy, my chest puffed with a pride I hadn't known I could feel. My mother glanced at it, said, "That's nice, dear," and immediately turned back to framing Clara's latest finger painting, which she declared a work of nascent abstract expressionism. The trophy ended up on a dusty shelf in the basement. The painting hung in the living room for a decade. When we were teenagers, the dynamic curdled from casual favoritism into active sabotage. I had a talent for design, a keen eye for typography and layout that I poured into school projects, and later, a small online stationery store I started. I loved it. It was mine. It was the one place my light wasn't dimmed by Clara's shadow. Then Clara decided my little hobby was an embarrassment. People will think we're poor, having a daughter selling greeting cards on the internet, she'd sniff to our mother. My mother, whose entire identity was wrapped up in projecting an image of upper middle class artistic patronage, agreed. They forced me to shut it down. They said it was a distraction from my real studies, the ones that would hopefully land me a sensible, boring job that wouldn't outshine Clara's incandescent future. The truth was, my little store was becoming successful. I had received a small feature on a popular design blog, and the orders were flooding in. My success was an affront to the family narrative. The ultimate betrayal, however, was the scholarship, the Redmont Institute of Design. It was my dream school, but I knew my parents would never pay the tuition. Art and design were for Clara. I was destined for a degree in accounting or something equally beige. So I worked in secret. For 2 years, I saved every dollar from part-time jobs and funneled my creativity into a portfolio. I developed a unique style, a fusion of minimalist digital art with classic botanical illustration. It was the best work I had ever done. It was my heart and soul on paper. I kept it hidden on the shelves in my room, tucked away behind old textbooks. A week after Clara stole my room in that life, she discovered it. She came downstairs holding my work, her face a mask of faux innocence. "Look what I found," she'd announced. "Ilara's been drawing. It's cute." I tried to snatch it back, but my mother intercepted. She flipped through the pages, her expression unreadable. "Where did you get these ideas, Ilara?" she asked, her voice cold. "They're mine. I've been working on it for years," I cried. Clara scoffed. "Please, you can't draw a straight line. You probably traced them from a book." And that was that. The seed was planted. A few months later, the prestigious Sterling Foundation Scholarship was announced. It offered a full ride to any design institute in the country. Clara naturally was applying. On the day of the submission, I found my portfolio gone. I knew with a certainty that chilled my bones that she had taken it. When I confronted her, she laughed in my face. "Prove it," she challenged. I went to my parents. I begged them to believe me. "She's a thief. Those are my designs." My father told me to stop being so dramatic. My mother's eyes were like chips of ice. "I have watched you your entire life, Ilara," she said, her voice low and menacing. "You have never shown a shred of the talent your sister possesses. You are so consumed with jealousy that you would invent this disgusting lie to ruin her one chance at greatness. You are not my daughter." They disowned me, not literally, not in a way the neighbors would notice, but in every way that mattered. They stopped speaking to me. They looked through me. I was a ghost in my own home, haunted by the specter of my stolen future. Clara won the scholarship. The announcement was a lavish affair. I watched the live stream on my laptop from the cramped storage room they'd exiled me to. I saw my designs, my soul, projected on a giant screen behind my smiling, triumphant sister as she accepted the award. She gave a speech thanking her wonderfully supportive family for always believing in her. Something inside me broke that night. The quiet, resilient part of me that had always whispered, "It will get better," finally went silent. The next week, I was driving to my part-time job at the library, my mother's final words echoing in my head. "You are a disappointment," when a truck ran a red light. My last thought wasn't of fear, but of a profound, hollow emptiness. I died feeling like I had never truly existed at all. Then I gasped, my eyes flying open. I wasn't in the mangled wreck of my car. I was in my bed, my room, my real room. Sunlight, the soft northern light Clara coveted, was streaming through the window. My phone on the nightstand showed the date. It was 2 months before the day she would demand the room. 2 months before the beginning of my end. I didn't cry. The terror and confusion lasted only a moment, replaced by a glacial calm. I had been given a second chance, and I would not be spending it as a victim. I would spend it getting even. For the next 60 days, I played the part of the dutiful, invisible daughter. I did my chores. I got good grades. I faded into the background, all while a meticulous plan was taking shape in my mind. I was no longer the girl who cried. I was the girl who waited. And when Clara stood in my doorway, repeating the lines that had once broken me, I was ready. I smiled, and the war began. My serene agreement to the room swap was the first shot fired. The second was my call to Great Aunt Maeve. My mother had excommunicated her own aunt years ago, painting her as a flighty, irresponsible eccentric who had squandered her inheritance. The truth, as I'd learned from piecing together hushed, angry phone calls in my past life, was that Maeve was a shrewd investor and a successful commercial artist who had simply refused to enable my mother's social climbing and financial recklessness. Maeve had seen the toxic dynamic in our family and had called my mother out on her treatment of me. For that, she was banished. I found her number in an old address book my mother had forgotten in a desk drawer. I slipped out of the house while Clara was busy arranging her new studio, and my parents were patting themselves on the back for their brilliant parenting. I walked to a nearby park, my heart hammering against my ribs, and dialed. She answered on the second ring, her voice exactly as I remembered from my childhood, like gravel and honey. Maeve speaking. Aunt Maeve, it's Alara? There was a pause, a long one. Alara, goodness. To what do I owe the pleasure? I imagine your mother doesn't know you're calling me. She doesn't, I confirmed, my voice steadier than I felt. I need your help. Last time I would have been too scared, too beaten down to make this call. This time I had nothing to lose and a future to gain. I laid it all out. Not the rebirth, she would have thought I was insane. But I told her everything else. The constant belittling, the sabotage, Clara's theft of my work, and the final, crushing accusation of being a liar. I spoke with the calm, factual authority of an adult who had already seen it all play out. I wasn't a hysterical teenager. I was a witness giving testimony. Maeve listened without interruption. When I finished, the line was silent for a moment. Then she said, "That snake oil salesman of a father and that narcissistic mother of yours, I knew it. I knew they'd crush you if I let them. Why didn't you call me sooner?" "I didn't know I could," I whispered, the first crack in my composure. "Well, you can now," she said, her voice firm. "What's your plan, kid?" This was the moment of truth. I'm moving out tonight. But my main goal is to protect my work. In my past life, I corrected myself quickly. In the coming months, there's a major scholarship, the Sterling Foundation Scholarship. Clara is going to steal my portfolio to win it. I can't let that happen. No, you can't, Maeve agreed. You're not going to let it happen. You're going to beat her with it. A grin spread across my face. That's the plan. But I need to set a trap. And so we schemed. My plan wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my life and my art. First, independence. I had the files from my old stationery business saved on a forgotten external hard drive. Maeve helped me set up a new, legally sound sole proprietorship under a name my family would never recognize, with a P.O. box and a business bank account they couldn't touch. My foreknowledge was my greatest asset. I knew which designs had been bestsellers, which blog collaborations had driven the most traffic. I relaunched my store with a targeted, aggressive strategy that would have been impossible without a glimpse into the future. Within weeks, money started trickling, then flowing, into my new account. Second, protecting my intellectual property. I gathered every sketch, every digital file of my real portfolio, the one I had died for. Maeve connected me with a copyright lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who helped me register every single piece of my work with the National Copyright Office. We sent dated, sealed physical copies to Maeve's safe deposit box, creating an unshakable paper trail. My art was now legally, verifiably mine. The final piece was the trap itself, the decoy. I spent the next few weeks creating an entirely new portfolio. On the surface, it was brilliant. It was technically proficient, visually stunning, and perfectly aligned with the kind of work the Sterling Foundation tended to favor. But woven into its fabric were cleverly disguised threads of plagiarism. I spent hours in digital archives, finding the work of obscure European illustrators from the 1970s and long-forgotten graphic designers from pre-digital Japan. I lifted a specific brushstroke style from one, a unique color palette from another, a compositional trick from a third. They weren't direct copies, but they were close enough that any expert panel, upon close inspection, would recognize the influence. It was a masterpiece of forgery, designed to be stolen. While I was building my new life, my old one was descending into chaos. As planned, I packed my suitcases that first night. While my parents and Clara were out for a celebratory dinner, I called a rideshare. I took my computer, my hard drives, my clothes, and my savings, every dollar I had painstakingly resaved. I left the storage room at the end of the hall untouched, a silent testament to the future they had planned for me. On the pillow of my old bed, now covered in Clara's garish floral duvet, I left a note. 4 words. I've moved out. Goodbye. I didn't go to Maeve's immediately. That would be too obvious. Instead, she had booked me a room in an extended stay hotel for a week under a false name, giving me time to disappear completely before resurfacing under her care. The night I left, I felt a sense of liberation so pure it was dizzying. I was in Ghost, but not in my own home. I was a ghost to them, and it was the most powerful I had ever felt. The frantic phone calls started the next morning. I watched them ring on my phone's screen, one after another. Mom, Dad, Clara, Mom's cellular, blocked number. I let them all go to voicemail, a silent chorus of panic I listened to with a cup of tea in my sun-drenched hotel room. My mother's messages were the most revealing. The first was clipped and furious. Elara, I don't know what kind of stunt you think you're pulling, but you will come home this instant. You are embarrassing this family. The second, a few hours later, was wheedling. Honey, we're worried. Are you safe? Just call us. Your father and I are very upset. The third, late that night, was a screeching harangue about my selfishness, my ingratitude, and how I was ruining Clara's concentration during a critical creative period. It was never about me. It was only ever about how my actions affected them and their precious prodigy. Clara's was a single, clipped message. Where did you put your old portfolio? The one with the flower drawings. I need to see it for inspiration. Call me back. The mask was off. She wasn't even pretending anymore. After a week of silence, I moved into Maeve's beautiful, light-filled loft apartment in the city, an hour's drive and a world away from my family's suffocating suburban home. Maeve's place was everything my old house wasn't. It was filled with art that was challenging and vibrant, books on philosophy and history, and the smell of oil paints and brewing coffee. She treated me not as a burden or an afterthought, but as an equal. She looked at my design work with a critical, professional eye, offering advice that was sharp and insightful. "You've got the gift, kid," she said one afternoon, peering at my screen. "Don't ever let anyone, especially my good-for-nothing niece, tell you otherwise." Under her mentorship, I thrived. My online business exploded. My foreknowledge acted as a cheat code. I knew which trends would hit before they did, which marketing strategies would be most effective. I poured the profits back into the business, upgrading my equipment, buying premium materials. I also poured my energy into my real portfolio, the one destined for the Sterling Foundation. It was better than the one from my first life. It was bolder, more confident. It was the work of an artist who was finally free. Months slipped by. The deadline for the scholarship loomed. My family's attempts to contact me dwindled, replaced by a stony, resentful silence. I knew, however, that behind the scenes, Clara was growing desperate. Her own creative well was shallow, reliant on the ideas she could steal from others. Without my work to plagiarize, she was lost. Then came the trap's bait. Maeve had a wide network in the art world. It was easy for her to drop a few hints at a gallery opening. My grandniece, Elara, is a phenomenal talent. She's applying for the Sterling this year. She carries her portfolio with her everywhere on a little silver USB drive, says she's terrified of losing it. The gossip made its way, as intended, through the city's art community grapevine, and inevitably back to my mother. 2 weeks before the submission deadline, it happened. I was sitting in a cafe near Maeve's loft, a spot I frequented. I had the decoy USB drive, a sleek silver stick attached to my keychain, sitting on the table next to my laptop. The real one was in a vault at Maeve's bank. As predicted, Clara appeared. She feigned surprise, her eyes wide and innocent. Alara, oh my God, I can't believe it's you. I've been so worried. I played along, my face a mask of weary indifference. Hello, Clara. She sat down, uninvited, and launched into a monologue of fabricated concern. How could I do this to them? Mom was sick with worry. Dad was losing sleep. They loved me. They missed me. It was a performance worthy of an award. I just sipped my latte and stared at her. I miss you, she finally whispered, trying to make her eyes water. I miss my big sister. Do you? I asked, my voice flat. Her act faltered. A flash of her true, venomous self appeared. What is your problem? Why are you being like this? I came all this way to find you, to try and fix things, and you're just sitting there like a stone. I'm busy, Clara. I have a deadline. I nodded towards my laptop. Her eyes darted to the silver USB drive. The hook was in. Is that your portfolio? She asked, trying to sound casual. For the Sterling, Mom told me you were applying. I think it's great you're still trying. The condescension was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. I gave her a small, tired smile. Something like that. I packed up my things, making a show of being flustered. I accidentally knocked my keys off the table. As I bent to pick them up, she palmed the USB drive with a speed that was almost impressive. It was a clumsy, desperate move, but it was exactly what I had counted on. I pretended not to notice. I said a clipped goodbye and walked out, leaving her sitting there with a triumphant smirk on her face and my entire stolen future, she thought, in the palm of her hand. I walked around the block, my heart beating a steady, triumphant rhythm. The trap was set. All that was left was to watch her walk into it. The night of the Sterling Foundation's award ceremony was a blur of expensive perfume and quiet, self-important chatter. The event was held at the city's most prestigious modern art gallery, a stark white space where every whisper echoed. Maeve and I stood near the back, two anonymous figures in a sea of artists, patrons, and academics. Across the room, I saw them. My family. My father in an ill-fitting tuxedo, looking uncomfortable. My mother preening in a silk dress, her eyes scanning the room for important people to impress. And Clara. She was radiant, a python in couture. She glowed with a smug, unshakable confidence. She believed she had already won. Why wouldn't she? The work on that USB drive was, by all accounts, spectacular. She had no idea it was a Trojan horse, beautiful on the outside and filled with career-destroying soldiers on the inside. The foundation's chairman, a severe-looking man named Meister Abernathy, took the stage. My pulse quickened. This was it. The culmination of a life's worth of pain and a year's worth of planning. Every year, he began, his voice booming through the gallery, we are astounded by the sheer talent of the next generation. This year, two candidates stood out in particular. Their technical skill was nearly flawless, their vision, breathtaking. My mother shot a triumphant look around the room. She caught my eye for a fraction of a second, her expression one of pure, malicious glee. See? It said. She wins, you lose. Just like always. First, Abernathy continued, we would like to award the runner-up prize. This artist demonstrated a remarkable command of digital tools and a keen sense of composition. The runner-up for this year's Sterling Foundation Scholarship is Clara Vance. A polite, scattered applause. My father clapped loud enough for 10 men. My mother looked momentarily disappointed. Runner-up wasn't first place after all, but quickly rearranged her face into a proud smile. Clara walked toward the stage, her smile unwavering. This wasn't how she planned it, but it was still a major prize. While the committee was impressed, Abernathy said as Clara reached the stage. There was a recurring note in our deliberations, a sense of familiarity. While technically brilliant, the portfolio lacked a singular, unique voice. It felt derivative. Clara's smile tightened at the edges. A murmur went through the crowd. Now, Abernathy boomed, his face breaking into a genuine smile. For our grand prize winner. This portfolio was not just technically skilled, it was groundbreaking. It was personal, innovative, and utterly original. It is with immense pleasure that I announce the winner of the Sterling Foundation Scholarship is Ilara Vance. The world went silent for a moment. All I could hear was the frantic pounding of my own heart. Then the gallery erupted in thunderous applause. On the giant screen behind the stage, my work appeared, my real work. The graceful lines, the vibrant colors, the fusion of styles I had bled for. It looked magnificent. I saw my family's faces. My father's jaw was on the floor. My mother's face was a grotesque mask of disbelief and horror. And Clara, standing on the stage, looked like she had been turned to stone. All the color drained from her face. Her eyes, wide with shock, found mine across the room. I gave her a small, placid wave. But the night wasn't over. As I started to walk towards the stage, Abernathy held up a hand. "One more piece of business," he said, his voice turning grim. "It is the unpleasant duty of the Foundation to maintain the integrity of this competition. During our final review, our authentication team discovered some deeply troubling similarities within the runner-up's submission." He clicked a button. The screen split. On one side was a piece from Clara's submitted portfolio. On the other side, an image of a dusty book cover from a 1970s German illustrator. The stylistic theft was undeniable. He clicked again. Another of Clara's pieces next to a page from an obscure Japanese design manual. And again. And again. He showed 5 different instances of clear, provable plagiarism. "The Sterling Foundation has a zero-tolerance policy for academic dishonesty," Abernathy declared, his voice like thunder. "We hereby rescind the runner-up award for Clara Vance and issue a lifetime ban on all future submissions. Her name will be circulated to our partner institutions with a formal notice of plagiarism." A collective gasp went through the gallery. The murmuring turned into loud, shocked whispers. My family stood frozen, spotlights of public shame searing them to the floor. Clara didn't move. She just stared at my work on the screen, then at her own exposed thefts, her face crumbling as the full weight of her public humiliation crashed down upon her. She had fallen into my trap so perfectly, and in her arrogance, had never once thought to question the beautiful poisoned gift I had left for her to steal. I walked past my broken family, my head held high, and stepped onto the stage to claim the future she had tried to take from me. The year that followed was like stepping out of a long, dark tunnel into the sun. The Sterling Scholarship wasn't just money, it was a key. It unlocked doors I hadn't even known existed. The press from the awards night, focused as much on the plagiarism scandal as on my win, made me infamous in the best way possible. I was the wronged sister, the hidden talent, the artist who had overcome a staggering betrayal. It was a compelling narrative, and the art world ate it up. I enrolled at the Redmont Institute, not as a desperate hopeful, but as a celebrated prodigy. My professors respected me. My peers were eager to collaborate. The suffocating weight of being invisible was gone, replaced by the heavy, wonderful responsibility of being seen. My online business, now a registered company named Northlight Designs, a final private joke, grew exponentially. I hired a small staff, rented a studio space not far from Maeve's loft, and watched as my little hobby transformed into a thriving brand. Maeve was my rock through it all. She was more of a mother to me in that 1 year than my own had been in a lifetime. We celebrated every success, from my first A+ at Redmont to my first 5-figure contract for a corporate branding project. I bought a spacious, airy apartment with a view of the city skyline, its walls quickly filling with art that inspired me. I was happy. I was successful. I was, for the first time in either of my lives, profoundly at peace. The fallout from my family was catastrophic, and, from what I heard through Maeve's discreet channels, deeply satisfying. They were social lepers, the story of their golden child being exposed as a fraud and a plagiarist at the city's most prestigious art event was too juicy a piece of gossip to stay contained. My father, whose business relied heavily on networking and his carefully curated image of a respectable family man, found his contacts suddenly unavailable. Deals fell through. His company began to bleed money. My mother suffered the fate she considered worse than death: public irrelevance. The society wives she so desperately courted now crossed the street to avoid her. Invitations to gallery openings and charity luncheons stopped coming. Her entire world, built on the fragile foundation of Clara's reflected glory, had crumbled to dust. Within 6 months, they were forced to sell the house, the one with my old bedroom, the one that started it all, and downsize to a drab, anonymous apartment in a less fashionable part of the suburbs. But the most complete ruin was reserved for Clara. She was a pariah. Blacklisted by the Sterling Foundation, her name was poison at any reputable art school in the country. No gallery would show her work. Her dreams, built as they were on my stolen ones, evaporated overnight. The last I heard, she was working as a barista in a chain coffee shop, her once manicured hands raw from hot water and cleaning fluid. She was powerless, forgotten, and left with nothing but the bitter ashes of her own ambition. One cold, rainy evening, about a year after the ceremony, a thick envelope with my mother's spidery handwriting arrived at my apartment. My doorman, thankfully, had redirected it from my business P.O. box. Inside was a 10-page single-spaced letter from Clara. It wasn't an apology. It was a long, rambling screed of self-pity and blame. She wrote about how hard her life was now, how unfair it all was. She blamed the Sterling Committee for being too picky. She blamed her professors for not nurturing her properly. She blamed our parents for putting too much pressure on her. And then she blamed me. "It's all your fault," she wrote. "You were always so jealous, always trying to hold me back. I was going to be a great artist and you couldn't stand it. You set me up. You planned this all, didn't you? Just to ruin me." The lack of self-awareness was breathtaking. She saw my victory not as a consequence of her own actions, but as a malicious plot against her. The final paragraph was the most telling. "I still don't understand why you had to leave. We were a family. If you had just stayed in the storage room and kept your mouth shut, none of this would have happened. Everything would have been fine if you had just stayed. Everything would have been fine for you," I thought, a cold, final clarity washing over me. I stood up and walked over to the fireplace in my beautiful living room, the letter clutched in my hand. I looked at the flames dancing behind the glass, a stark contrast to the dreary rain streaking down the windows. For a fleeting moment, I felt a ghost of pity for the pathetic, broken person she had become. But it was just that. A ghost. The person I was now had no more room for the people who had tried to destroy me. I didn't need to hold on to their memory, their toxicity, or their pathetic attempts at rewriting history. My victory wasn't just in winning the scholarship or building a successful life, it was in my freedom from them. Total and complete. I opened the fireplace screen, and with a quiet sense of finality, I tossed the letter into the flames. I watched as the paper curled, my name and her accusations turning black before vanishing into a wisp of gray smoke. The last connection to my painful past, the last echo of my first life was gone. And I turned back to my warm, bright, beautiful present, finally and truly free.